Poke the Bear is brought to you by Prize Picks.
The excitement, I think, for Bruins fans, for media, for onlookers, for whoever, from James Haggens in the draft this past weekend, sort of got tarnished a little bit on Tuesday with free agency. Fans are not happy. I know we were all in the press box at Warrior, and everyone was kind of like, what is going on here? Let's run through the moves on Tuesday. First things first, they traded for Victor Arvidsson from the Oilers for a 5th-round pick. Then they got into signings. Tanner Jeannot, 5 years times $3.4 million annually. Sean Corrali, 2 years times $1.85 million annually. Michael Asimont, forward, 2 years, $1.45 million annually. Forgive me if I say this incorrectly. Matej Blumel, 1 year, $850,000. Alex Steeves, forward, 1 year, $850,000. Jordan Harris, 1 year, $825,000. Haverhill native. Riley Tufte, 1 year, 2-way contract, $775,000. Jonathan Asperat, 1 year, 2-way, $775,000. Then they signed a goalie, Luke Kavalin, entry-level deal, $775,000. So some of that is going to just be like, all right, those are bottom 6 guys. I think what fans are most pissed off about is Tanner Jeannot, 5 years, $3.4 million annually, which when I saw that, I was like, excuse me, what did they do? What are the Bruins doing? Like, what is this? We knew this was not going to be a great free agency class. You were not going to upgrade, your top 6 drastically. This was, a lot of teams have cap space. A lot of teams have even more cap space than you. Just a ton of bottom 6 guys who, to me, don't really move the needle.
Yeah, it's not the most encouraging day, I would probably say, right?
No.
I think if you're a Bruins fan. And from talking to Don Sweeney, it seems like their priority was adding a buzzword that Don Sweeney used quite a bit was competitiveness and intensity, physicality, all those kinds of things, which I wonder from their perspective. I'm not saying this is the right call because I think we're on the same boat, probably with a lot of Bruins fans who are expecting a little bit more in terms of maybe talent. You do wonder from the Bruins perspective if the fact that the free agency class just completely dried up, right? I mean, today sucked in terms of there was no really earth-shattering moves. Brock Besser doesn't even leave Vancouver. Marty Necas is on a cruise probably somewhere having Mai Tais. He's like, I'll deal with this later. So not a whole lot of movement in terms of the really franchise fortune-changing high-end talent that the Bruins obviously need. So I wonder if they look at, they were clearly dissatisfied with how this past year went in terms of not just the results, but I think maybe the competitiveness, the intensity, and they wanted to have a couple of, maybe cage rattlers, I guess is maybe the apt term in terms of, this is a team that has a lot of younger players coming up. They have a lot of new players that are trying to establish themselves, maybe having some prickly players or maybe established veterans, right? Like the Genots or the Sean Corrales, these types of players. If the younger players can learn and feed off that energy and you're able to, sprinkle that talent throughout the lineup, I guess that's the way they're going with in terms of just how the free agency class played itself out. But you just look at the depth chart, right? And it doesn't feel like the Bruins have 4 fourth lines. Beyond
yes.
we know Geeky,
yes.
Lindholm, Pasta, but then it's all right, your second line is Zacha, Middlestat, Arvidsson, most likely, and then it's yikes, right? Because it's just, the Bruins can maybe look at this past year and thinking they needed a lot of those cage rattlers or just more intensity, more, guys that are going to be really locked in. And that's something that even Marco Sturm mentioned, right? Of practices have to be better. We need guys that are dialed in and ready to go. And I could see that being the Bruins looking at that group and being all right, we need more of that. But you still don't have scoring. You can be a more intense team. You can be a more physical team. You can stick up for one another. You can have all this stuff. But isn't the best way to take another big step forward is winning? And it's that
would help.
I look at, let's say Tanner Jeannot and all these guys are really physical and they set the right tone and the younger guys fall in lockstep with them and all that stuff. But that only goes so far when you're still losing 4-1. Or even if they're expecting like the defense and the goaltending to be better, right? And I don't think that's a stretch to say that, right? That Swayman and the defense is going to be a lot better. But okay, so are you losing 2-1? Like, I think you look at what this team's fatal flaw was this last year, in a year where a whole lot went wrong. I think we all agree with that. But the one thing that I don't think you can fix internally, and the one thing that's not an easy fix, is just skill and offensive generation. You had to get that on the open market. And yes, maybe you weren't able to get a Besser or someone like that, but would you rather give 3.4 to Tanner Jeannot or like Andrew Mangiapane or Jack Roslovic or, Evgeny Dadonov, who's, maybe he's cashed out, but could be a 20-goal guy. Like, it's almost like, I think if you're able to find another type of Arvidsson, like a $3-4 million player that can score 20 goals. Maybe he's more of 15 goals at this point, but still a guy that adds that scoring punch. I'd rather that than what you're doing right now, because I like almost in a vacuum. And I know I'm rambling quite a bit, Evan, so apologies. But okay. I feel like when you're signing all these players, I like some of these guys individually. And I think we'll kind of go through that. Like, I don't hate like, oh, Corrali is a good veteran guy to bring in. Easymont's kind of a prick, and you kind of can use that. But when it's like 6 or 7 or 8 of these guys, and you look at like the fact you still have Beecher and Kastelik and Husnadinov and all these other players, not even counting the younger players that you hope cut into the lineup. I just look at the roster right now, and I try to figure out like what the 4 lines are going to be. There's like 5. There's like 5 lines, of which most of them are like bottom 6 level players right now. It's just, it feels like a stretch to expect that like the offense is just going to come naturally, or that they'll be able to weather the storm, where I feel like I think you have to work a whole lot just to generate chances, let alone score goals.
To me, and this is pure speculation, I think they looked at this free agent market. I think they looked at the roster, and I think, early in the offseason, I think they realized they are not going to improve dramatically enough via free agency, maybe even not the trade market. And that's why they went the way they did in the draft, where it was all high upside. It was all skill guys. It was some projects on defense, all those different things, because I think they realized this is a middling team. This is a middling team. And even I feel that way. I feel that even stronger after the moves they made, which I don't agree with. I think you look at, you hit on all those things. Like they could not score last year. They couldn't generate offense last year. Ty Anderson made a great point to me. We were walking to CVS to get a drink. It sounds like an alcoholic, but to get a Gatorades.
I mean, did you see that free agency class? I don't blame you.
Gotta get myself a Bud Light at a CVS. But and he mentioned a great point. He said, if you look at the wins they had last year, it was either like a Pastrnak or a geeky takeover, or whoever was in net was like outstanding. And feels like that's going to be the same thing again this year. And that to me feels, it shows again why like they're a retooling team. They're completely a retooling team. This is not it's a deep roster, but a mid roster. Like at their best, at this team's best, it's competing for a playoff spot. I'm not going to say in the playoffs, but like at its best, this is a team that's in and around the mix. You need guys like Elias Lindholm to be much better. You need Pastrnak to continue the play that he had last year. You need Morgan Geekie to continue to be a 30-goal guy, which is no guarantee. No guarantee. You need Pavel Zacha to step up. You need Casey Middlestat to be consistently productive. You need Charlie McAvoy to be much better than he was last season. You need Hampus Lindholm to be okay after his injury and revert back to what he was in the fall. Arvidsson. You need Jeremy Swayman to be way better than he was last season. And that's just to get you to what? The second wild card spot? The first wild card spot? And that to me is where the extra scoring comes in. And you hit on some guys like Roslovic or Dadonov, who no guarantees, but have more of an offensive upside. With Jeannot, Easimont, Corrali, you're leaning into what your problem was last year. Big and slow. And Connor, you and I talked about this a lot in the past season. They didn't have enough veteran guys in the room. Clearly. Guys like Shattenkirk were gone, Maroon, you lost Bergeron and Krejci and all these guys over the past bunch of years. So yeah, bring in some character guys for sure on 1 or 2 year deals. on under $2 million. Like AC Mont, as you said, alone, fine. Corrali alone, fine. Janot for 5 years. Like
at 3.4 is also like I can't
3.4.
tell which part is like gives me more trepidation, right? Is it the term or is it the payout? Like,
I mean, has there ever been a deal where you look at more and say like, oh, that's going to age like milk, like that's going to be something they're looking to buy out after year 3, and it's not going to. It's not like
Martian's 6-year deal. Maybe that one's going to age like, but he's going to be a hell of a player for the first 2 or 3.
You want to you want to cup with them before, and I imagine the Panthers are going to find a way to win another one, but like to become slower, and to me it feels like they're hoping this can be 23-24. Where you bring in these veteran guys and hope that something comes together. The only thing is those guys had some offensive upside. Like James Van Riemsdyk had upside. Shattenkirk had some upside on that. This is just more big and slow. And like, with Tanner Janot, like, and this point's been made by more people, but like you dealt Frederick, which was a good move. You dealt Brazeau, which was a good move. So you bring in Tanner Janot, who you don't know, who has been other places. Teams have realized he ain't the guy, all these different things. And suddenly you bring him in on a 5-year deal. 5 years. That's what I don't get. And I don't know Tanner Janot. I don't know what he's like in the room, but I can't find anything that he's like this phenomenal leader that he's going to come in and like wheel these guys along. Like, I haven't seen it. Maybe it's there and they better hope it's there. But that's where I like, this is just a continuation of last year. And, again, at their best, they're going to be a middling team. At their worst, are we sitting here 11 months from now going, number 1 pick's not far away? Like, they shouldn't. The lot would have to go wrong for that. But are they a top 10? Are they a lottery team again?
I mean,
wouldn't shock me.
It all comes down to, it's almost like, wouldn't the worst case scenario be like the fact that the goaltending and the defense stabilizes, which I think is not out of the question, right? Like, I don't think it's either putting on the fan service or being unrealistic of like Swimmin bounces back, the defense tightens up, especially with Lindholm and McAvoy coming back from injury. Could totally see that happening. So at that point, are you in the worst spot where you still can't score? So that means instead of being a dreadful team where you're at least getting a draft pick out of it, you're like middle of the pack and just stuck in no man's land where it's all of a sudden like, well, we bottomed out 1 year and we got James Higgins, which is great, but we can't add another great defenseman with a top 10 pick or another center or a scoring wing or something like that, right? I think you have to also see what happens, and it all comes down to, I think, just the offense part of it, right? Like, and it's, you just look at the team and it's just so hard right now to forecast who's going to go where. Like, it's not even counting the fact that, all right, you have all these bottom 6 level players, right? And it's like, not even now counting the fact, like, all right, if this was a year where, you sign 1 or 2, instead of throwing all that money, you bring in Arvidsson, you bring in another scoring guy, like let's say give $4.5 million, because of the way the cap's jumping up, to Roslovic, which, like, big body, kind of can skate pretty well, but you really don't know what you're getting offensively, but it has shown that he can be a 20-goal guy, right? Let's say that's a big thing, and you bring in one of AC Mont, what have you. A little less crowded. I'd rather you have that where you're taking a few flyers on guys. You're trying to add like a different dynamic with Arvidsson and another winger. And you're also giving the opportunity for guys like Matt Poitras and Fraser Minton and Fabian Lysell and, Georgi Merkulov, all these guys. I'd rather give them an extended window to see if they can do something in a year where, based on the way they've built it right now, it feels like they are still treading water, right, in terms of how competitive they're going to be. They want to be competitive, but you're also, I think, setting reasonable expectations with the group you have right now. So Don Sweeney mentioned that, they're focusing in on, competitiveness and intensity in training camp and in practices and all that stuff. But also when you're, a head coach in Mako Sturm, who's in his first year ever as an NHL head coach, you want to make a good impression. You want to get off to a hot start. Of course you want to give like the younger players the rope, but when you're in that spot where it's the last day of camp and you got to cut down the roster and it's like, oh, Matty had a few good games and, he liked Fabian in that one he scored in the preseason finale, but like, ooh, like we could just put like, Corrali and a few of those other guys there. We know they played in the NHL. They're responsible. Like, we need to be slow and steady and responsible to start things out on the right foot, right? Like, can't you just see that kind of happening where
I can.
where it's not just the fact that you have the roster spots filled, but you almost have like a safety blanket now where it is, if you're a coach and you're in that spot where you have the opportunity to turn to veteran guys as opposed to taking the risk, even if it leads to greater results down the road with, let's say, a younger player like a Minton, right? I'd rather you have a spot open for Minton where you look at it and you roll the whole year with them. You have some growing pains, but at the end of the year, if Minton, let's say ends the year on a 10-game run where he's got 4 goals and 2 assists and is playing better, and you feel good about where he's going to be next year in 26-27, and Haggs is there, you feel a lot better where you're going to be. And it's like at the end of this year, if it's going to be another situation like this past season where instead of giving a lot of those younger players an extended run, you had Vinny Lettieri and Riley Tufte, who's also back, and Max Jones, and all these other players, Oliver Wahlstrom. You get to the end of the year and you're like, what was all this for when we're seeing what Minton and all these other players could do instead? Like, I don't want it to be a situation where you go to the end of this Bruins season, whatever the results are, and you look and you're like, well, they have Haggs, but man, I can't believe they only gave Minton 18 games and we got 60 games of Genoa with four goals and a bunch of penalties, or any one of these other guys they signed. Like, if that's what it ends up being,
He tried to
then
fight
it's another
Sam
year
Bennett,
of
though,
wasting
Connor. He everybody felt taller when Tanner Genoa was on the ice. So
Yeah.
that was
And
most important.
And you know what the Panthers do? They laugh on the way back to the locker room, be like, what a bunch of fucking losers, as they beat you like 7-1. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, they can be more physical, but if you're in a spot where, you can have that physicality and step up for one another, best way to beat a team like the Panthers, these teams that drive you nuts, is kick their ass on the ice. Because otherwise they're going to laugh at you and then go to
Beat
work.
him on the scoreboard.
Yes.